Good evening, I'm Paul Adler. First on this Thursday night, bullying is a top concern for student safety in Missouri. And prevention researchers say there's more the state could do to equip schools to deal with all of this. Hannah Falcon looks into the state policies and resources to prevent bullying.
As students of all ages head back to school, some may be scared of the social dynamics they're going to encounter with their peers. Well, researchers here at the University of Missouri are working to combat bullying.
It's such a complicated social context for kids.
Chad Rose began researching bullying prevention after he noticed the lack of resources when he worked as a special education teacher.
And this is where all my students work.
Now he's moving his bullying prevention lab into its own space at the University of Missouri, where he will work with college graduate and undergrad students to equip schools to intervene in bullying. Data I obtained from the Missouri State Highway Patrol's anonymous tip line, Courage to Report, shows that bullying was the most common tip submitted this year, followed by threats to kill or shoot someone. Rose and his students are doing their part to address this issue, but he tells me there is more the state could do.
As we're telling schools they have to do something about it, yet not giving them the tools, resources, and supports to do those things.
Missouri law requires every school to have an anti-bullying policy, but the state does not provide a sample policy or any additional funding to help implement a policy. I reached out to the Department of Elementary and Secondary Education and several lawmakers, but could not get anyone on camera today.
It would be great if we could start there, but also providing schools with the resources necessary to do things related to functional and social skills.
A bipartisan bill called the Missouri Childhood Hero Act would have laid out more concrete policies on how exactly a school could address bullying, but the bill did not make it to the finish line this year. Reporting at the University of Missouri, I'm Hannah Falcon.